afternoon, everyone. Welcome to sunny Dundee. We're actually aboard the Discovery, not the one you might all know and love from Dundee. We are sat above the 2012 Discovery in the port of Dundee on this beautiful summery day. First of all, you'll hear from myself and Sophie from the 1901 Discovery, Scott's Discovery, and then we'll hear from Richard and Sara from this Discovery here about the science that people are doing nowadays. So, as I said, my name's Kim. I am the Education and Communities Coordinator for Dundee Heritage Trust, who have the pleasure of looking after the 1901 Discovery. And this is...
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm the Interpretation Curator over at Discovery Point, where we look after Discovery. So I look after the galleries and exhibitions.
So, let's take it right back to the start. The 1901 Discovery was built literally just up the water down here at Panmure Yard in 1901. As some of the kids that we were taking around this morning were saying, it was built and launched in March, but it didn't set off to go down to Antarctica for a little while afterwards. It reached New Zealand just before Christmas, and just before Christmas Day finally set off to go down to Antarctica. But what was it hoping to achieve? Well, it had two aims, actually. It was equally to go and explore things for the very first time. Some people had been down to Antarctica before, but not much was known about the continent. So they went out in search of finding out loads of new information. But they were also tasked with doing lots and lots of science while they were down there. And they were given some of the most up-to-date equipment they had in 1901. A lot of this was around magnetics and sounding equipment. Now, here are some of the things that they were able to find out. Once they were finally packed into the ice down in Antarctica, they got out one of their most cool, in my opinion, pieces of equipment, and it was called Eva. It was a balloon that they filled up with gases and tethered it to the ground, and the first descent, up went Scott, and he was able to see a lot of snow and ice. They couldn't see anything much past the huge Ross ice shelf, which they already knew existed. But the fact that there was nothing beyond that they could see made them realise quite how vast this continent was going to be. So down came Scott, and up went the third officer, someone we might know as Shackleton. And up he went to see if he could see anything more than Scott could see. And again, couldn't see anything but a lot of ice and snow. So down he comes again. Edward Wilson, the ship's biologist, thought that it was perfect madness that they were doing this. Of course, they wouldn't see anything. But for the rest of the time they were down in Antarctica, all the way through to 1903, they made some pretty good scientific discoveries. I'll list them for you. They discovered a piece of land, partially on that ascent in the balloon, and they named it after the king, which was King Edward VII, so it was part of the Edwardian times. They climbed up the Western Mountains and discovered a place called the Polar Plateau. They made the first sledge journey across that plateau, and they found Ross Island, and they managed to document some of the nature that was going on there. They also found the heights of more than 200 individual mountains. They also found huge valleys to match those mountains. They found an emperor penguin colony at a place called Cape Crozier. They found scientific evidence that the great ice shelf that they'd seen upon Eva was actually floating and wasn't part of the continent. Ferrer, who was one of the geologists, found a leaf fossil down there, and that proved that Antarctica was once part of a huge supercontinent. So it helped us understand how the Earth has got back to where it is today. They found thousands of geological and biological specimens. They found pretty much the location of the South Magnetic Pole, and Wilson found out that if you eat seal meat, it stops scurvy from happening. So when they got back to Britain, they handed back all of their information to the people who had done the mission, called the Royal Geographical Society. And from then on, they went on and had a huge and varied career, some of them as scientists and some of them as explorers, really showing that dual nature of that first expedition. The ship was then sold to a company called the Hudson's Bay Company, and they were basically using our lovely exploration ship as a trade ship between Canada and Europe, and it continued to do that through the First World War as well. But when the 1920s came, everything changed. The ship was once again needed for scientific exploration, and Sophie is going to tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in 1923, the Discovery was sent for refit to prepare herself for this new era. She was commissioned by the British Colonial Office to become the Royal Research Ship Discovery. It was commissioned as part of a whaling expedition, so we were trying to find more whales for the industry. They found out a lot more data. So they were researching the breeding patterns of whales. They were finding the currents that were feeding them. They found out the krill. They found out the habitat they were working in. They looked at sounding and they measured the seabed. And they did a bit more charting on Antarctica as well. So it was vital. And instead of finding more whales to kill, they actually started a conservation program. And the expedition they went on, it became part of the Discovery expeditions. So that the reports for that went on until the 1980s. And the information is still in use today.
So a little bit more about that information that's still in use. So the Discovery I and the Discovery II were out together. The Discovery I went off to do other things and eventually found its way back to Dundee. And then we've had the Discovery III as well. And here to tell us a little bit about Discovery IV that we're on here is Richard and Sara.
Hello, my name is Richard Lampitt. I'm what's called a biogeochemist, an oceanographer at the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton. And biogeochemistry is trying to pull together the biology, the chemistry and the physics, that's the way the water moves backwards and forwards, of the ocean to understand it.
Hi, I'm Sara Fowell. I'm an ocean research scientist at the National Oceanography Centre. I specialise in ocean acidification and also developing sensors that help us to measure different chemistries happening in the ocean.
The ocean covers nearly 3/4 of the planet. And not only does it cover an enormous area, it's really deep. So it's got an average depth of about 3.5 kilometres. Whereas the land, which is that remaining quarter of the planet, is only perhaps about 50 metres high. So animals live in these two environments, and we call this the biosphere. The consequence of this is that 99% of our planet is ocean. So it's really, really important. And we use it for all sorts of things. We use it for transportation, for military purposes. Most importantly, at the moment, is that it takes up a lot of the heat and the carbon dioxide that mankind's producing. Sara knows a lot about.
So the ocean is really important to everybody. Even if you don't live near the ocean, it has an impact on your life. Every second breath you take, the oxygen has been made by tiny marine plants called algae and phytoplankton. And even as you're flicking through the internet, 95% of internet traffic that's international passes through underwater cables through the sea. But what we're going to talk about is all how the ocean helps us to regulate climate and how important it is in helping us to combat climate change.
So there are two main ways that carbon dioxide, as we said just now, carbon dioxide is taken up by the ocean. Some of that is just dissolving in the ocean. And other parts of it are from what's called the biological carbon pump. And what happens here is that you've got these microscopic plants, we call them phytoplankton, which take up carbon dioxide from the water and therefore from the atmosphere, and these grow in that top sunlit part of the ocean. These then get eaten by animals, the small shrimp-like animals, which then die or produce poo, which settles down through the water and therefore removes that carbon from the upper part of the water column. So what we really want to understand is how these various processes work together, the biology, the chemistry and the physics, how they work together, and how this integrated system, which covers, as you'll remember, 99% of the planet in terms of its volume, how it works together and what is happening at the moment and how it's likely to change in the future.
So the ocean in the climate, particularly in the North Atlantic, the circulation here is really important for the weather in Scotland. So the circulation of the North Atlantic actually carries heat all the way around the Atlantic, and it actually keeps us warmer than we should be for this latitude. And it's not just transporting heat, the ocean also transports carbon, because the ocean is the world's largest carbon sink, and it actually absorbs up to 30% of the carbon dioxide that we emit as humans through our activities. And what scientists like me enjoy doing is finding out how that impacts the chemistry of the ocean, and then the knock-on effect of how the changing chemistry affects the biological life in the ocean. And one way we can do this is by deploying lots of sensors in the ocean. And there's a really cool program called the Rapid Mooring Array. And this involves having huge chains of instruments in the ocean. So we put sensors on these long chains that measure things like the temperature, how salty the ocean is, how acidic the ocean is, how much oxygen there is there. And some of these instrument chains are the equivalent of 11 Empire State Buildings tall. So really, really tall, just full of instruments collecting tons of data. And to do this, we need to put them in the ocean. And we need research ships like the RRS Discovery to help us to do this. And first, we throw the end of the mooring off the back of the ship because it's got lots of floats on the back of it. And then the captain drives really slowly for kilometers as we're reeling out this chain of instruments into the ocean until the whole mooring is flying out flat on the surface of the ocean. And then the very last thing to go in is a huge pile of weights, and then it sucks the whole mooring down to the bottom of the sea. So it's anchored at the bottom, and this chain of instruments stretches all the way to the surface. And these instruments stay in the water for up to 2 years, and some of the instruments measure temperature, for example, every second for these 2 years. And then we come back on the ship 2 years later, and we reel them all in so that we can take the data off the instruments and put new ones in the water. Because the longer we have ocean observations, the more we understand how the ocean's changing in response to climate. And this data can also be used in computer models. So some scientists take observational data and plug it into their computer to help them to predict the weather, predict changes in climate, and predict how things like species of fish and algae will move in the ocean in response to climate change.
So we're on this extraordinary vessel, the RRS Discovery, which certainly it's the fourth in the line since Scott's discovery. And as Sophie and Kim have said already, there was a lot of things going on in those early years which were really relevant to what's happening now. So we've got this extremely sophisticated ship with very good scientists and ship's crew and officers and a whole load of people back on shore. So making this really integrated, powerful system for studying this ocean, which we really need to understand if we're going to make sense of what is happening now, the way it works, and what's likely to happen in the future. And one of the other aspects is of course, pollution. We are well aware that we dump a whole load of things into the ocean, but why do we really care about that, and what effect do they have? So it's using ships like Discovery, which enables us to make those observations, find out how much plastic. I mean, I run a microplastics research group down in Southampton, and we really need to know how much plastic is in the ocean, how did it get there, how long does it last, how does it change, and what does it do to the ecosystems of the ocean. Maybe it makes the oceans behave in a way so that they don't stop climate change, they don't reduce the effect of climate change as much as they should do. So we need to know this. So that's why we need to have really good research into the way the oceans operate, the way they function, so that we can make sensible decisions.
Something that's really exciting is seeing some of the techniques that Scott and his crew used on the original Discovery cruises, and we still practice them today. So for example, they sent what were essentially metal bottles off the side of the boat, and they brought up big volumes of seawater, and they took the seawater into the lab to measure the chemistry of the water. And we still do exactly the same process today, only on a much bigger scale. So now
Here's the prop. So this is a model of what's called a Plankton Net. So we tow this, much bigger than this, and we put it over the side of the ship, we lower it down, then we drag it up over the top, perhaps 200 meters. And at the bottom of this, we have a sample of the animals and the larger microscopic plants which exist there. And this is the same sort of technique which was used 100 years ago, and now we are still using this to collect the samples of the animals that live there. So that's one of the things, in spite of us being able to use very sophisticated sampling measuring instruments and the sorts that Sarah's described, which can make measurements of carbon dioxide and temperature and various other properties, we do still need very much to collect material, whether it's the plants, the plankton, such as by this, or the sediments beneath, so we can take cores of the sediment underneath. It's really essential that we keep on taking these samples and being able to, in order to understand the way the system works. I guess that's probably all we need to say, isn't it? Unless you want some questions, I believe you're going to be asking questions.
Yeah,
We're
well,
very happy to answer.
I had a question as to how could people watching get into jobs like yours, doing cool research like you guys are doing?
There's no limits, no limits. Never believe you're limited by your capabilities. Just try really hard, really work hard, and be very determined, and then you can move into this tremendously exciting and really important area of research, science, or supporting the science. I mean, there's lots of good things to make this happen.
Yeah, all around us we have both people from our team and people from the ship's crew as well, which have really helped put this together, that help drive the ship to where you guys need to be. So there's loads of different ways that you can go and do this work and
Yeah, oceanography is such a diverse subject. So if you have an interest in maths, chemistry, biology, engineering, ship science, that's all part of oceanography. You know, robotics and software engineering, all of that can be applied to ocean science. So there's lots of ways to be introduced to the fun, because we get to see some really awesome stuff that's a real privilege that other people don't get to see. You know, we can be involved in discovery of new animals and new changes in the climate and new ways of measuring things, and it's just always exciting. Or you're around people that have exciting stories all the time, so just find any subject that you enjoy doing and you can pretty much guarantee you can turn it into oceanography.
Okay, I think that just about wraps us up then. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for your wonderful knowledge,
Thanks for having us.
hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.